Amy, thank you so much for being here and being a guest on our podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jesse.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this episode, and I'd love to dive in first. I always love hearing what first got you into the recruiting space.
Yeah, when I was in my previous profession, I actually worked in public accounting as well as corporate finance. And I had the privilege of being pretty heavily recruited by recruiters. So I was able to maintain a relationship with quite a few over the years here in Detroit, where I'm from. And then I also worked out in Southern California for about 10 years. And, obviously was able, like I said, maintain those contacts. And about 10 years into my career, I decided that I wanted to make a career change. And one of the avenues that I thought potentially about going into was recruiting. So,
Hmm.
what I did on some of the calls that I would get when I was working in my previous profession, I actually turned the call onto the recruiters and asked them, if they thought I would be a good recruiter. Obviously, I had the relationship with them, and some of the individuals had, helped me get interviews over the years and had worked with me quite a bit. So they were able to actually draw upon their experiences with me, and, I was fortunate enough that, a few of them actually did think I would make a good recruiter. And that really is what helped me get into the profession.
Interesting. I've never heard somebody do that before. I love asking this question, and usually it's just, hey, it just fell into my lap or something
Yeah.
like that. But actually asking recruiters if you'd be a good fit after you have that relationship with them, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it was one of those things where I always saw the value of recruiters. Some
Mhm.
people get annoyed by them, but I always thought, hey, I mean, every time I talked to recruiters, they always had a wealth of information in
Mhm.
terms of the market and different hiring schemes and things of that nature that I always thought was very helpful, even if I wasn't looking for a position, right? So I always saw the value in recruiters.
Yeah. Yeah. And what keeps you doing it? Why do you love doing what you do now?
So, for me, the reason why I got into it is because I wanted to help people. Like I had a sense that I really wanted to help people. And so I still feel that way. It's still what keeps me going. I think as I've progressed in my career in recruiting, I definitely think I help people, but I think my purpose is I'm like a problem solver. I think at the end of the day, people come to me either on the client or the candidate side with problems, right? And basically I use the knowledge I have to help them solve these problems. And, I do get a lot of satisfaction out of
Mhm.
doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it's a lot of work. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, when you're talking about, because I know you don't just place everybody and everybody, and you don't have everybody being your client. Who's your typical client, and what's your typical candidate? Who do you typically place?
So, from a client perspective, I am primarily here in the Detroit market. So, my clients are typically, what you would think you would find in Detroit, which would be manufacturing, automotive suppliers. I don't work with the OEMs. I mean, I have. We do have some other industries here as well. But what I can tell you from a size perspective, my client base is anything and everything. So, everything from like a mom and pop up to, huge publicly traded companies.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. And what's the level? I know you focus on executives, you focus on that on your LinkedIn, but what types of executives in those companies do you focus on placing?
Primarily in accounting and finance. So that was my background when I was working in my previous profession.
Hmm.
So it was obviously the easiest kind of avenue for me to get into in regards to recruiting because I had obviously all of that knowledge base from when I worked in the profession. It obviously helps me relate to the individuals that I am recruiting. I mean, I understand a lot of their struggles that they have in terms of their careers and really setting their career goals and their objectives, and kind of how do you make things like that happen from an objective or a career goal perspective. Like what are some of the kind of situations that I was in when I was in their shoes, and
Mm.
if I would have known then what I know now, it's kind of one of those situations where I kind of like share my knowledge and my understanding now. But yes, it's typically accounting and finance professionals, typically individuals like manager level and up,
Mhm.
is kind of the type of candidates that I typically help.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm confident that if I was in their shoes, it would be really a nice change of pace to talk to somebody that's done what they're doing, and be able to
Yeah.
actually get that view of, okay, Amy's done this. What should I do and what should I focus on? I think that's pretty important and a nice change for them. Um, you talked about a little bit before we started recording about trends that you're seeing. So what trends are you seeing in the job market? Exciting opportunities and maybe even some challenges you're seeing for clients or candidates.
Yeah, I think the job market, has been challenging, as we've started out this year. I think we're all aware of it. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in terms of, the economic situation. And obviously there are some global repercussions. And in the market that I am, it's very much a global market in the sense that, um, you know, the president talks about our particular, industry all the time, the automotive
Mhm.
industry, and how global it really is. And, those types of conversations are ongoing all day long, within, the market I work in. But what I can tell you is that the market it can be really slow, but it also can be really busy. It's very interesting. We go through periods where we are slow, and then we go through periods where we're so busy.
Mhm.
And what we're finding is that when our clients have needs, they truly have needs. It's not a situation where, in previous years we would have a lot to work on, but sometimes we felt like our clients were maybe testing us to see, if we could come up with that unicorn candidate or that perfect candidate. Where in this particular market, when my clients when they call us up and they have needs, I do not get that. I don't get that from them at all. Actually, I get that they really need us to help fill positions. So I mean, that is promising. And one of the things that I've seen in the last couple of weeks is there has been a pretty serious uptick in terms of need, which is very refreshing. And it's something nice to finally experience this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that is nice when you're busy, but also it's got to be a little stressful, right? Because you go from maybe 0 to 100 back and forth, and then you're having to, find perfect candidates or close to perfect candidates to stick your neck out and put them in front of your clients. So is it a pretty stressful time right now?
No, I wouldn't say it's stressful because when you aren't as busy, you spend a lot of time networking. So when
Mm.
you do get busy, you typically have an inventory of candidates that you've been speaking with for that are actively looking, right? But a lot of, and I want to also say a lot of what I do is passive recruiting though too. So it's just continuing those passive conversations that I have with people. I mean, one of the things in my particular area, I could be networking with someone for 10 years and finally place them after talking to them for 10 years. I mean, it's a pretty long cycle in terms of
Mhm.
my relationships. And I don't
Yeah.
necessarily make relationships with the intent of, things necessarily coming to fruition at any point in the near future or anything like that. I mean, these are
Mhm.
definitely long standing relationships. But when you are slower, you definitely are out, networking more and getting an understanding of individuals that may have a hiring need or individuals that potentially may be a little bit more active in terms of their search.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a good thing for at least our clients to have that understanding and know, hey, that making the relationship right now doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get placed right away, but having that relationship maybe 10 years down the road, right? I hear that all the time. People saying, I met this person 20 years ago and I've placed them twice, but they were two 10-year gaps apart or something like that, right?
Right.
So relationships are key and being proactive and having everything ready just in case. So you
That's
can
correct.
be ready to be placed or make that move. So that
Yeah.
that is interesting. And what well, I guess we might have touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper of what advice would you give candidates that are trying to navigate this job market? I've talked to two candidates in the manufacturing industry this week alone. So I'm curious, what would you say to that?
I think at the end of the day, it's actually pretty easy. I think what I'm noticing a lot from people that I speak to is that because the job market was so good for the last 4 to 5 years, at least it was in the Detroit metro area where I'm located,
Hmm.
it was a situation where if you had the right skills or if you had enough of the right skills, if you showed
Hmm.
up to the interview, you got the job.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing is with candidates, I always tell them, when they go on interviews or when they're applying for positions, to really be an active listener. I mean, that is like really critical what I'm seeing. It's because companies want very specific skills right now based upon what is going on, from a market perspective. And I think a lot of times what I'm noticing with candidates, they think they know, but they're also not listening enough to really understand exactly what their problems are and what they're looking for individuals to solve for them. Uh,
Mm.
so, my advice would be to really pay attention to job descriptions and really listen, in interviews in terms of kind of what they're talking about and essentially what their needs are. Don't think that because you've got this experience or you've got this wealth of experience, because you may have the experience, but you may not be portraying it in a way that speaks to the problems that they're trying to resolve.
Hmm. Yeah, that is so interesting because I just started reading a book called Never Split the Difference. I don't know if you've read that book, but it talks about listening a lot and how
Yeah,
most people are thinking about what their response is going to be rather than actually listening to what the problems are. And I'm sure when you're a candidate trying to land a new position, that is crucial, right?
it
You
is.
think
It is.
everybody understand that, but I guess they don't, right?
No, it is. It is. I mean, I think, and a lot of people always ask me, because I'm a little bit of a quieter recruiter. I think a lot of times people think people that are like headhunters or recruiters are super talkative people and, kind of over the top. And I'm a little bit on the quieter side. And it is because I'm always listening. I'm always trying to hear like what's going on, and that's definitely something that I would, really tell people is to listen during the job process because companies are looking for very succinct, skill sets, attributes, and in most cases, they're telling you exactly what they want, and in many cases, especially if someone like me is involved in the transaction, I've lined up probably someone who has all the attributes. It's just a matter of them presenting them and really listening for, like I said, what they're looking for and really when to present, what we've talked about.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. I appreciate that. I hope people are listening to this or when we post this that they're going to listen to your advice. And I think it's great to know. And to just think about some of those simple things like listening, right?
Yes,
It's just
it's
key.
easy.
Yeah, it's easy, but they need to remember to do it, right?
Easy. Yep.
So I love that advice. And what what would you say makes a candidate stand out besides listening? When they're looking for a new position, what's going to make them stand out to compared to what I'm seeing a lot of qualified candidates applying for same positions as others?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part of it's listening because at the end of the day, most people that are applying for positions, they probably have the qualifications or the skill set, right, that the client's
Mhm.
looking for. The other piece is like really portraying yourself as a problem solver.
Mhm.
That's really, in my mind, when I, am interviewing candidates for my clients, I typically have a good read on who's going to get the job based
Mhm.
upon, how they present themselves to me. And what I can tell you is individuals that, basically portray themselves as problem solvers and really listen to what I'm saying in terms of what the
Mhm.
client is looking for, and then present themselves as a problem solver around those particular issues. Those are typically the candidates that get the job. And the people that can really pick up on that in terms of like, basically, kind of what we're working towards when I give them information and they present themselves in that way. Those are typically the individuals, like I said, that get the job.
Mhm. Do you find that I didn't think about asking this question, but do you find yourself giving a lot of interview prep, coaching type stuff when you're talking to candidates on the phone?
I do. I do. I think culturally things have kind of shifted. I've been doing this for quite a while. And, I would say in the last few years, I think a lot of times people think they know what people want to hear or people want to see, but
Mm,
I actually don't think, I think a lot of times they don't, right? So yes, I
yeah.
do spend a lot of time doing interview prep and really helping people focus on what, the client would like them to focus on in terms of how they present themselves.
Mm. I would be grateful for that, right? I mean, being in their shoes and having an inside look and knowing, hey, this is something that would be helpful if you focused on that. I hope people actually listen to you and take that advice before going in. I'm sure some people are pretty hard-headed and going into those, but I like that information. I do. I'm gonna make sure to tell our clients and people that I speak with, just friends and family as well, that are looking to keep those things in mind.
Yeah.
Um, let's switch gears and talk about some common mistakes. I think this is all tied into listening. Honestly, I didn't expect the podcast to go this way, but I love it, right? I want to focus on some common mistakes though. What besides not listening in that interview or even before the interview, maybe common mistakes before you even meet them. What are you seeing or what's the first thing that comes to mind?
In general, I try to, just in general, I typically think about things like in a very simple way. So, one of the things that I've seen over the years get people in trouble, even if they are a really great candidate, is, when you are in an interview, even if you're very well qualified and you're very accomplished, one of the things I always tell people is, it's kind of like being a guest in somebody's house, right? So you just really want to have the right decorum and how you go about yourself. You go about in a way where you just have the right manners and you're behaving in a way where you kind of are a guest in somebody else's house. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. Like I said, the other thing is just not listening and not portraying or presenting yourself in a way that makes sense for them, or over talking. I mean, that's another one,
Yeah.
where you don't want to talk too much. Obviously, you don't want to talk too little, but when I got into the business, they used to tell me to tell candidates to say it and shut it. That was just very simple. Say it and shut
Yeah.
it.
Uh-huh.
If they ask you a question, say it and shut it. That's some of the areas that I see, some people having issues with. I think the other thing is just really being aligned in terms of salary and working arrangements. I've seen some deals really go haywire because, either a candidate or client weren't aligned in terms of salary. I mean, obviously that's my job to make sure that we are aligned,
Mhm.
but what I can tell you is that given the situation that we're in now, everything's ever evolving in
Mhm.
terms of compensation. So it's just in every step of the process, just making sure that everybody is aligned in terms of compensation. And then the other piece is working arrangement. If you don't want to work 5 days a week on site, don't apply for a position that says it's 5 days a week on site. In
Mhm.
general,
Yeah.
if clients are putting that information out there, that's typically what they want you to work, because I've seen situations where we've spoken to candidates and said, this position is 5 days a week on site. And then, three interviews deep in the process, they're like, well, we didn't think you were serious.
Mhm.
And we're like, no, we were.
Yeah.
We were serious.
Yeah.
This is a position that is going to require you to be 5 days a week on site. So,
Mhm.
like I said, I mean, it's just a lot of it's alignment driven, just making sure everybody's always aligned. Or when you apply for a position, really read some of those details and understand that if they say, this is what a position pays, or this is the working arrangement, that's truly what they mean.
Mhm. I find a lot of people that I speak with are so focused on having remote roles and they're applying to a lot of positions that aren't remote,
Mhm.
right? So I'm happy to hear that I'm seeing the same thing you're seeing
Yeah.
and telling people, hey, apply to positions that are remote or aren't, right? And be willing
Yeah.
to do that so you can land the position. Be willing to adjust for your client, the employer, right?
Correct.
Um, I appreciate everything you've said today. The one thing I want to highlight as well is your talk about compensation. I just had a client last week talking about how to know what compensation to expect. And I really like the focus and you mentioning, hey, you are a great middleman in that area when you're helping
Mhm.
candidates be placed and you're finding the right candidate for your client as well. I think that's good for people to know as well. But I want to give people that are listening, maybe it's a client or a potential candidate that thinks that they're a great fit or they'd love to work and hire somebody through you. What's the best way to reach you?
The best way to reach me is you can actually reach me at my email address. It's apotts, apotts at vention.com.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. Thank you for being a guest. I hope to have you on again in the future. And thank you for all your great advice.
Yeah, thanks for having me.